Hey, it's Dan McDonald here. I am with Stephanie Seneff. She is the senior research scientist at MIT. Today we're going to talk about autism, uh, what we think is causing it, and what you can do about it. Stephanie,
Great.
tell us a little
Thanks.
bit about how you got involved in
Okay.
checking out the autism.
Yes, well, actually, it was many, many years ago, 30 years ago probably, that I had a friend whose son was about the same age as my son, and he got a DPT shot, had a bad reaction, and later regressed into autism. And that just kind of planted a seed in my brain to watch for autism. I was curious. It was very rare at that time. So many years later, I was watching the autism rates go up dramatically, in fact exponentially. And I got concerned because most of the research dollars were going towards genetics, and I understood there must be something in the environment that's causing this. And so I decided to just take a look and see if I could figure out what it was, and kind of systematically going over all the various chemicals that these kids are exposed to, which of course is a huge list, so it's a daunting problem to figure it out. And of course, many parents have said they think that the vaccines cause their autism, and because of my friend's experience, vaccines made sense to me. So I first looked at the vaccines. And I was quite surprised to find that the MMR vaccine, I discovered that the MMR vaccine was linked to autism in the database that the US government provides on vaccine adverse reactions. The FDA has this vaccine adverse event reporting system. And in that database, you can look at all the different events that are reported, and you will find that there's a link, there's an association between autism and MMR. And
That one specifically?
that one specifically. There's other ones too. Aluminum, of course, also has an effect on autism. And many of the vaccines have aluminum. And of course, mercury is the big one that Robert Kennedy talks about. And I don't know if you're aware, but there's this hope that Robert Kennedy is going to head a committee. He's going to do a commission study on vaccine safety and try to see if we can make vaccines safer. Appointed by Trump, which is
wow.
quite remarkable.
Hey, what's going on here?
We'll see if that actually happens. At the moment, it's a rumor, but I really hope it does, because we need to be worried about vaccine safety. And it's not just that the vaccines have ingredients that they know are in them that are toxic: aluminum and mercury and glutamate, for example, formaldehyde. There's a lot of things in the vaccines that are toxic. But on top of that, vaccines have contaminants in them. In fact, there was a new paper that just showed up recently that talked about they looked for various metals, toxic metals, and they found, tungsten and lead, really nasty metals as contaminants in the vaccines, they were very surprised. I'm surprised. But things are getting into the vaccines that have no business being there. In other words, the manufacturing process is sloppy. And so whenever you inject something into a child, you have to really be worried about what's in there, and the potential for that to do harm. And so I saw the MMR vaccine, and then it was after I discovered it from the VAERS database that I found out about the story with Andy Wakefield. I hadn't known about that before. Andy Wakefield had written a paper in 1998 linking MMR to autism. And then he had gotten completely destroyed by the industry because he had written that paper. The paper got retracted. He lost his license to practice medicine. They accused him of fraud. They just basically tore him apart. So now there's a term called Wakefielded. It's a verb, to get Wakefielded, which means to get taken down by the industry, because you are dare to say that vaccines might be at risk, might cause something bad, particularly autism. So we see that autism rates are completely out of control now. And I'm really puzzled that the government just seems to think that that's not a problem. It's not like it's a national priority. We don't hear about it. It's like it's fine. The schools are all struggling to deal with all these autistic kids. And now the first crop are starting to grow up. Well, of course, the parents.
Yeah.
The parents are completely overwhelmed when they have a child with severe autism. And it is not...
Some have 2 or 3.
I know. In fact, there's a paper that just came out. I just read it this morning, brand new paper. A case study on triplets. A very interesting paper. The author is William Shaw. A set of triplets, 2 boys and a girl. The 2 boys both have autism. The girl has a seizure disorder. And he tested all 3 of them for glyphosate in the urine. They had very high levels of glyphosate in their urine. And they also had an overgrowth of a particular microbe in the gut called Clostridium. And the Clostridium was producing something called toxic phenols, which are the metabolites of the Clostridium that are toxic, and those toxic phenols were causing an overabundance of dopamine in the brain, which was burning the brain out through sort of oxidative damage, too much on fire neurons in the brain to cause the autism is what this paper proposed, which I think makes a lot of sense.
So to simplify it, it's almost brain inflammation.
Brain inflammation is really very clear that that's a story, that's a component of autism, this kind of, chronic low-grade, what they call encephalopathy.
What is causing that?
What's causing that, and it can easily be this overgrowth of a particular form of microbe that generates these toxic, metabolites that then excite the nervous system and cause this brain on fire kind of reaction. And so this was just, this paper is really exciting to me because he linked it to the high glyphosate in the urine, which is amazing. That's the first time I've actually seen the direct link between glyphosate and autism. And glyphosate, which I don't think I've mentioned yet, is the active ingredient in the pervasive herbicide Roundup that is all over our food supply, but also I suspect that there's glyphosate contamination in the vaccine. So we talked about the metals that were found in this paper, the toxic metals like tungsten and lead, but I suspect if they were to have tested for glyphosate, they would have found that in some of the vaccines as well. And we have actually done that. I'm working with a chemist named Anthony Samsel, and he has tested 20 different vaccines for glyphosate, and he has found glyphosate in several of them. And the ones where it's showing up are either grown on gelatin, or they have bovine serum. It's fetal bovine serum, which is the calf, the blood of the calf, right? You use that as a growth medium. These things are both going to be expected to have glyphosate in them, given that the cows and the pigs are fed heavy doses of glyphosate in their feed, because they have this GMO Roundup-ready feed loaded with glyphosate.
So
goes into their...
The glyphosate is getting in there on accident.
By accident. They're not putting it in there intentionally. I would be amazed if they were putting it in there intentionally, but it's accidental.
They're not aware that the mediums which they're using are
Yes.
infected because it's getting into the animal's food supply.
That's what I think,
And
yes.
then they're using toxic animals.
Toxic animals to produce the things that the virus is growing on, and then the virus incorporates the toxic chemical, the glyphosate, into its own proteins, and then it becomes allergenic, and it causes an immune reaction, an autoimmune attack on the brain. So that's another whole angle with the MMR vaccine, that the measles virus, and so the MMR, in the context of someone who's been chronically exposed to glyphosate in the food, where they have a disrupted gut, glyphosate induces a leaky gut, and it induces a leaky brain. And so this allows the chemicals in the vaccine to go into the brain, including the live virus. So the measles virus in the MMR is a live virus. It goes into the brain. And then the brain's immune system responds to the measles virus and produces antibodies, which is the point of the vaccine. The vaccine is, you need antibodies, but you're not supposed to get them in the brain. The brain is supposed to be
supposed to be sealed
protected.
and sealed.
Protected, but it has a leaky barrier. Measles virus gets in, the brain's immune system reacts, and then you get autoimmune disease.
In the stomach is associated with the protective membrane in the brain.
It is exactly right. It's
Oh,
really,
have you
really
found
interesting. There are
scientific
papers
evidence?
that say that when the leaky gut develops, then it induces the leaky brain. It's really fascinating, and I'm sure it's through the microbes. The microbes are able to communicate to the brain opens up, and there's sort of, I think, a reason why this needs to happen under this circumstance where the gut is so sick. So the microbes are sort of crying for help in a way, and they're spilling out into the larger cavity of the whole body. And
the tight junctions.
They're no longer contained in the gut the way they're supposed to be. The tight gut junctions loosen up, and in fact, I've worked out. There's a lot of different specific, biological stories in there that I've written about. But one that's particularly interesting is a microbe called Desulfovibrio, which has been shown to overgrow in the gut in association with autism. Desulfovibrio produces hydrogen sulfide gas, and hydrogen sulfide gas will erode the gut barrier and open it up. So I'm suspecting that's one way by which the barrier opens up in response to the glyphosate. Because
So
the glyphosate
some type of
induces the overgrowth of the desulfovibrio.
inflammation. To simplify, it's an
Yes.
inflammation. Glyphosate causes inflammation by what pathway?
Well, lots of ways, it's
Okay,
all
I know.
complicated, but certainly one is just the disruption of the microbes. Glyphosate preferentially kills the beneficial microbes, like lactobacillus,
Because it is a antibiotic.
Well, it is an antibiotic, but it turns out that it's specifically more antibiotic towards the good guys rather than the bad guys. So it allows the bad guys to get more breathing room, because the lactobacillus is especially sensitive to glyphosate. And that's because it depends on manganese, and glyphosate makes manganese unavailable. That's one of the reasons. So there's all this different,
That's why the probiotic supplementation can be so beneficial for
yes,
the autistic
it can
kids.
help to restore them, and then they can help to keep the pathogens at bay, because the pathogens, when you get too many Clostridia, they produce these toxic phenols that causes the dopamine, that causes the brain on fire. So all of these different things are happening in response to the poison, which is the glyphosate.
And so is autism, it's definitely oversimplified to say brain inflammation, but that is one of
It's
the
actually
key.
very good words to use.
That
Brain inflammation. I actually
you're a
wrote.
scientist, so you're like, your
Yeah,
words
I
are
wrote a
huge.
paper that talked about a low grade chronic encephalopathy, which is basically brain inflammation, as a key feature of autism. I think it's definitely true.
Is that the same as encephalitis?
Yeah, encephalopathy is encephalitis is more of an infection, whereas encephalopathy is just like, it might not even be an infection. It could be in association with an infection, but it doesn't even have to be because of microbes.
It can just be the leakiness of it getting
yeah,
deeper.
well, just these glutamate, for example, glutamate and glyphosate work together to excite a certain class of receptors called the NMDA receptors. And the NMDA receptors, if they get too excited, then again the brain burns out. So you've got the dopamine, too much glutamate, and all these things are sort of neuroexcitotoxic, and they cause the neurons to go on fire, and that's when you release all these oxidation, all this oxidizing damage.
And is that killing neurons at the same time?
Killing the neurons.
From
Yeah,
the
they basically
stress.
burn out. They they just get completely on fire, and they can't contain themselves, and they just burn out, and then they just die.
So the child's brain is just slowly being oxidized due to the presence of chemicals
Yes.
that are leaking through the leaky
Yes,
gut.
yes.
So when we go to help autistic mothers, have
Start
your
with the gut.
researchers- okay,
First thing to
yeah.
do is heal the gut. And of course, I think the probiotics are really exciting, even prebiotics. So these are like food for the microbes, right?
Which would be, what I talk about, the fresh fruits and vegetables.
Yes, yes.
As prebiotic fiber for the beneficial.
Absolutely. Fiber is exactly a good example of a
And the
prebiotic.
moms should know too, and the dads that are working with autistic kids,
Yes.
is that there are beneficial microbes on fresh organic plant foods.
That's
that
right.
Really
And eating
build-
raw, really good way to keep those microbes alive.
Yeah, as much raw as you can.
Yes.
Like we talked about in the last video, we defer a little bit, but
Yes.
that point is obvious. Fresh food out of the garden or at the grocery store to the best that you can do to
Yes.
regenerate the gut. for
Yeah,
the
and
kids with
eating
the
all these
autism.
polyphenols and flavonoids, the colorful fruits and vegetables, they provide polyphenols and flavonoids that are going to help you heal the gut also, and heal everything else, because once you heal the gut, then everything else falls in place. The gut is really the source of most of the other problems.
And so for the autistic kids, or even the people and everyone in between that we've talked about, all the way to Alzheimer's and
Yes.
autoimmune and the craziness in between.
Yes.
The inflammation, the leaky gut, causing kind of mental disturbances due to the inflammation, due to the leaking of chemicals that normally the brain could, in small doses,
Right.
protect itself from that. But
Right.
the onslaught is so intense.
It's just too much.
And so what I've wanted to share with autistic moms and dads for years is, generational accumulated synergistic toxicity. I've never heard anyone talk about that, but that was just what came up with me.
Yes.
Because grandma had DDT,
Yes.
mom had DDT, and why are we still peeing out DDT?
I know, it's amazing, isn't
Same
it?
thing with the glyphosate, and so
And
the
there's-
accumulation.
There's also, of
generation-
course, generational epigenetics, which is really interesting, that the child's epigenetic programming is influenced by the environment in the fetus. During the fetal development, whatever's going on at that time, that child's body is adjusting to that so as to do different things as in the real world. Once it's born, it goes down a different pathway epigenetically because of having been exposed to chemicals in the womb.
Chemicals, or even emotional states, or
Exactly.
the chemicals that are natural as well.
Natural
which
chemicals that are
the
caused by...
natural chemicals are less, the body knows how to handle
Yes,
those.
it understands them better.
And this is what I think
Yes.
of with the autism and everything else. Really, it's all kind of one thing to me. But it's just that, that the chemicals are, inhibiting the processes of your happiness and your joy and
Yes,
your health
yes.
and your wellness.
Right, and it's just, it's so important to just get back to natural organic food, and so in terms of treating the autistic child, I said previously, getting the child outside barefoot at the beach in the water, really, really healing with the sunlight.
Yeah.
That whole environment is so holistically healing, and that will really help the child to regain its equilibrium and start to heal. And then along with the probiotics, prebiotics, and super organic food, whole foods, natural foods, minimal processing, it's all very, very important to focus on the foods.
This whole, you've seen the thing, autism, it's a mystery. It's
Yes.
kind of like, it's
not a mystery. I don't think
really.
it's a mystery. I think we understand it. I mean, I'm really excited that my buddies and I, we've been cracking the code wide open. I think we really get it. The problem is how to get the message out to the rest of the world and to get parents to be aware, how to prevent it, and then hopefully how to restore health to an autistic child. And I know there are cases of autism that have been reversed. And that's through this mechanism of going back to an organic diet and eating all of these probiotics and antioxidants and flavonoids, all of these good herbs, spices, all of those good foods that are going to help you heal. And of course all the natural minerals, mineral salts. So for example, soup, bone broth is really, really important. Of course you don't, I guess because you're vegetarian you wouldn't approve of it.
I have my ways though. Doing very similar things with different plants and
that's
seaweeds.
Great. Yeah.
And I can make herbal teas, high mineral.
Plant-based bone broth.
Yeah, I go down and I actually
that's
harvest
interesting.
these plants off the ocean, the purslane.
That's really neat.
And I can make herbal teas that have a mucilaginous property.
Yes,
then I take the different seaweeds.
Those would probably be very, very helpful for an autistic child because
extremely.
those mucinoids, that's really, really important. The mucins are part of the problem, that the mucins are destroyed by the chemicals, especially glyphosate.
I'll tell you, I have a heavy metal detoxification program for autistic kids.
That's got to be
anybody.
Good. Yes.
And the main components are the curcumin or the turmeric, and nobody ever uses enough. They only they're like this, and I'm like, that's not good. You have to really use the curcumin.
It's a great spice.
And then you've got the chlorella, the spirulina, the cilantro, and the dulse, which are all chelators in different ways. Dulse is probably one of the greatest chelators for the heavy metals. The issue is the saturation technique. And my brain farted about 5 minutes ago when I had this train of thought, but it was the difficulty of the body to recognize the synthetics as opposed to, you might get stressed out, but we've been stressed out here and there for millions of years. So your body has these mechanisms to mitigate that, and after about an hour or two the tiger's gone and you're back to normal. The problem is with the synthetics is the body, they're made
I hate
in the laboratory.
The synthetics, and it just really is annoying that every time they find some natural ingredient that's like curcumin, for example, that's healthy, then they want to find some kind of a drug that does the same thing. They're always looking to make a drug so they can patent it. It's so ridiculous because now you've got some stupid synthetic thing your body doesn't understand. The naturals are
there's
so
synergistic
important.
Toxicity, and then there's synergistic bioavailability. And that's why all these fancy things with turmeric, you know what I do? I just take a 4-ounce shot.
Wow,
and that's when I notice the effects.
Really
or I
great.
will eat turmeric like carrots.
Wow.
And I know about autism, brain inflammation, aluminum and mercury poisoning more than anyone could possibly understand,
Yes, well, it's very interesting with the curcumin because it can transport sulfate. I mentioned to you earlier about the sulfate deficiency.
It's a transporter.
Curcumin can help to deliver sulfate to your brain, which is really great because it can transport it.
Okay.
And sulfate is difficult to transport, so curcumin sort of gives it a boat to ride in, if you will.
Interesting. I think that's why the turmeric and garlic
is sulfur.
With dulse.
Yes, you've got the garlic to make the sulfate, and then you've got the turmeric to carry it. So the two of them together are fantastic.
Because I've never had a lot of results, and I've done the different the medical chelators. EDTA, not much luck there. The natural ones, I've noticed the lowered anti-inflammatory effects, especially of curcumin. I've noticed the benefits massively of probiotics and enzymes.
Yes, that makes sense.
Alkaline herbs.
Yes.
And with the kids, what you've got and what everyone's got to these minor to moderate degrees, and it comes and goes depending upon conditions, but it's inflammation.
Absolutely.
And it's the immunoexcitotoxicity
inflammation
in the brain,
is key.
but all through the joints and the nerves. And so everything we're doing for everyone is like I could super simplify everything. We are inflamed, we need to get alkalinized, and we need to get the inflammatory causing
very good advice.
chemicals. It's just that. And
it's
that's
really
whether
quite
that's
simple if you just know what to do.
Or, mercury and aluminum,
Yes.
which, I mean, we don't need to go into this too much, but those mercury by itself is
Yes.
one thing, aluminum by itself is another. You
Right.
put those two
That's
together,
really
you just
horrible.
poured some diesel on a forest fire, and that's only
Yes,
two of them.
I know.
So it's
I
the
know. And the
synergy.
glyphosate, of course, makes all of them worse. So both
Yeah.
the aluminum and the mercury become much worse in the presence of glyphosate. And so it just goes
So
on
let's
and on.
sum up what, glyphosate, mercury, aluminum. I
Yeah.
mean, what's the real? Is it the synergy of it?
It's absolutely the synergy, and of course, those are just three: mercury, aluminum, glyphosate, and there's many, many other ones in the environment as well.
That we don't even know about.
Yeah, they're all causing trouble, but I think the glyphosate and the vaccines are the big ones. To me, those are the two big ones that are causing the autism. I
Have you
think
been poking around looking for something else?
yeah, well, I've
maybe?
looked at lots of things, and
those,
the
are
thing
those
is
the
that
triage?
I think so. I
Those
think
three?
I think if you could get rid of the vaccines, to be honest with you, just completely stop doing the vaccinations, and then you could go organic, eat organic food. I think you would pretty much make the epidemic disappear. That's what I would predict.
Yeah, and the younger that you can get to these kids, the one thing about being an adult with brain inflammation is that you can get a protocol and you can go on a
Yeah, no, it's
cleansing
hard to-
program. But for the autistic kids, boy,
Often
you've
they won't
got-
eat anything, right? It's very difficult to get them to eat, so that's a
and
challenge.
they need those stuff, and that's why one of the things that I've done for my clients is to blast them with probiotics and enzymes. And I've
Yes.
heard the mothers talk about
That's-
the miracles.
Yes, I've heard so many good words about probiotics. It's really been
Oh, so you've never heard much about the enzymes?
the enzymes too, yes. And of course the enzymes actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because Anthony Samsel and I are doing research on glyphosate, and he's actually hands-on. He's sending stuff off and getting it measured. And he recently looked at 3 enzymes: trypsin, pepsin, and lipase. These are 3 important
Yeah.
digestive enzymes from the animals, from the pigs, and they all came out tested positive for glyphosate. So they are contaminated with glyphosate, and the glyphosate is making them not able to work properly.
I use plant-based, grown on mushrooms, so it's very much a part of the natural process.
Oh, that's
so
interesting.
I have this really great supplement that I use.
That's
and
really
recommend.
neat.
It's
And they're like
super
digestive enzymes, are they?
Yeah.
Yes, that's really great.
And there was
That's
one
really
of my
great.
clients, she
That
her
makes a
child
lot
couldn't
of
talk
sense. Wow,
for
that's such a
years.
great story.
The day that she fed him enzymes, he spoke
Wow,
3 words.
wow.
After years of not a
That's
single word. So
incredible.
the enzymes thin
Yeah,
the
because
blood.
because the enzymes actually digest the food, and so when the glyphosate is preventing you from digesting your food, then the food proteins don't get digested, and then you have the leaky gut, so the proteins get out into the circulation, and then the immune cells respond to those proteins that aren't supposed to be
That
there.
are in the blood.
Yeah, in the blood, in the lymph, and then you get an autoimmune disease because through molecular mimicry, because the body gets confused and it sees your own proteins and it matches enough.
It's not attacking itself. And that's what
It
everyone
ends
keeps
up
saying.
attacking
I see
itself
the
because
politically correct.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
it's
the
not
food.
attacking your cells. That's like saying God and Mother Nature are retarded.
Yes.
It's attacking the things that have leaked into the blood and now are sitting somewhere.
Yes, and that causes an immune reaction and gets you into autoimmune disease. And I think we have so many, allergies to different foods, the gluten intolerance. The gluten is directly connected to the glyphosate because the wheat is sprayed with glyphosate right before the harvest. It goes into the seed. So wheat germ has really high levels of glyphosate in it because it's the seed. They're spraying it right before the harvest to kill the plant. It's not a GMO crop, but they're using the glyphosate to kill the plant right before the harvest, which is just so sick. And now all of a sudden we have all these people with gluten intolerance. I never heard of gluten intolerance when I was,
For the
for
last
most of
20
my
years.
life.
A lot of people joke about it, but there's a lot. If you understand, it's like you have to look below the radar to
Yeah.
see what's going on.
Well, it's really interesting to me that we just accept it. Oh yeah, wheat's bad for you. Oh yeah, I don't like, I can't tolerate wheat. Oh yeah, I can't tolerate wheat either. It's like all of a sudden it's fine that nobody can tolerate wheat. I mean, wheat is a pretty basic food,
It's
It's
a real
crazy.
good food if you
I
do
think
it right.
so. Yeah,
I like to sprout
bread.
mine.
Oh,
Turn it into bread.
sprout is the
Sprouted wheat
perfect.
bread.
Oh,
Not
that's
even baked. Just
sprouting
baked in the
really
sun.
makes a difference too. That's really
That's
a healthy
living
way
bread.
to use it. That's
But
absolutely.
with the wheat and stuff, you just can't. There's nothing. You
Yeah,
can't even use it anymore.
and you've got all the casein intolerance, which is milk allergies, dairy allergies, and peanut allergies. I mean, huge problems with peanut allergies. It's really ridiculous.
We're just overloaded. I think that I wanted to ask you about the glyphosate blocking enzymatic reactions.
Yes.
And why maybe that's why the enzymes produce such good results for people.
I think so, because you're giving them additional enzymes, and in fact, maybe these plant-based enzymes are more resistant to the glyphosate action. I don't know. No one's researched that.
Well,
but
they're free from the problems of the animal stuff, which
Yes.
I understand the animal thing in another time.
Yes, yes.
But nowadays,
Well,
they're bioaccumulators.
Yes, well, and actually, you have a good reason to avoid animals these days because of the fact that their proteins are more closely matched to ours. So when you have an animal protein that you don't end up digesting because your digestive enzymes are being wrecked by glyphosate, and of course, the animal protein could have glyphosate in it as well, and that also makes it resist digestion. So you end up with these animal proteins that get loose in your blood, and then that becomes much more likely to generate autoimmune disease because they more closely resemble our own proteins than plant proteins do. So that's a really good reason not to eat animals if those animals have been exposed to glyphosate, and if
Which
you've got it in your
98% of them
it's
are or more.
oh, it's got to be. I mean, I'm worried even about grass-fed these days because the grass. I mean, they're producing a GMO Roundup-ready grass now, so I'm like, oh my God. So it's very difficult to assure that the animal protein that you're eating is healthy.
So the mothers can be assured that they're not crazy. Your doctor just doesn't know. Your pediatrician, they don't know because they're not trained. And we're just a couple of searchers,
Yes,
seekers.
we're just trying to get the answers, and we need the answers quickly. We really need to get more searchers involved because mothers of autistic kids are really finding the answers, and I'm in such admiration of them.
Yeah.
I go to this conference every year called Autism One. It's really fantastic, and there are
Yeah.
all these parents of autistic kids, and they are just working so
They're
hard.
really working hard to get.
And it's so
the
difficult for
message out.
them, and they say, and they want to make sure, can I give my child this? Is it safe? They're like, they don't want to, they're using their child as a guinea pig in a way. They're searching for answers and they're desperate to find, and they have to do a really deep search to make sure this is safe, this is not going to cause any harm, what is the reason why you think this will be good? And then to decide, should I give it to my child? That's a lot of stress, because to be proactive about trying to fix your child, not knowing what the answer is, and just to go out on a limb and make that choice on your instinct or on your just, and because
Wow.
you've done the research. And so these mothers are really admirable that they're
They
really,
have to go back to nature
it's
and
so
the true
yeah,
healing.
and you can really feel having your child play in the water at the beach. What bad thing is that going to do?
Well, that's the oxygen and the
But
sunlight.
because
and all those
that
other
is
healing.
that can't be bad, and therefore do it, and there's going to be good in it, and it's going to be safe.
There's other technologies that are available. They're just not politically correct right now or very well known. If anyone has any questions about autism, I can definitely help the mothers or the fathers to get some really clear ideas on moving yourself forward and, lowering the inflammation and pulling out those chemicals.
It sounds really great, actually. Your program sounds outstanding.
I've got a very clear program that I've been practicing for about 6 months off and on, using it on other people.
Yes.
I'm my own greatest guinea pig.
It's really great. And of course, you're doing
progress.
this, which you're doing it for yourself, which is a little bit less scary than doing it for the child, right? Because when you put your child's confidence in whatever you're giving them and you don't know if it's going to work or not, I think that's just really scary, And they feel they have to do it because if they do nothing.
You know what, though? The thing is once you really understand this, you're not even using anything that's questionable.
Well, that's why I think all these natural choices
chlorella
are so much
questionable?
safer,
No, spirulina, amazing.
But if some doctor's handing you some drug that they want you to take for your autistic child, then
right, those are the ones you're talking about.
Yeah.
But see, that doesn't work.
I know. I
you
think
need
so.
those binders. I'm looking into zeolites right now. I haven't found. There's some issues with zeolites. I don't know if you've been aware of that, but some of them. It'd be really nice to be able to get that, but I think that the slow and steady, long-term approach.
Yes, I think
to
with good
slowly
nutrition.
Saturation. That's what I call it. You're saturating with enzymes, probiotics, as much raw food as you can, vitamins, minerals, but in the fresh, natural, organic
I think
sense.
that's
and then
really
you're pushing. And then of course, you stop the influx of those chemicals.
The chemicals aren't coming in anymore,
Not
and
in
you're
the food,
flushing them
not
out.
in the shots.
So over time, things are going to get better.
Especially when they're young. So start them now because it gets harder as they get older because the toxins get cemented in as they are the body's trying to protect you from those synthetics that it doesn't recognize.
Yes.
That's the obesity, that's the inflammation, that's the foggy head.
Yes.
And so I do the saturation technique, and it's safe because there's nothing that's even questionable. It's just food and hydration and sunlight and enzymes
really
and
nice.
food source. basically what it is it's saturating the child or the adult
Yes.
with life.
Yes.
Life, 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 life.
And it's going
And
back to
that-
nature.
And that's your brain, you're thinking life, you're sleeping early, you're turning the Wi-Fi off at night, you're getting fresh air, sunlight. It's a slow and steady process. And then there are deeper protocols, herbs that are powerful, different types of fasting and cleansing, which, I kind of save for, the more of the consults and stuff when people are really ready to hear the deeper information. Because it's not really, you don't want people to go, you have to go slow and steady. You have to be more aware these days that you're slowly chelating so that the liver or the kidneys.
I know you don't want to do it too fast,
Yeah.
because then you can really get in trouble.
So if there's anyone with inflammation, heavy metal poisoning, autism, Alzheimer's, it's just get the natural, healthy, organic, wholesome, high water, sunlight, hydrogen, mineral rich food and supplements in, and become aware of armpit stuff and face stuff and hair stuff and the air and just, I call it shoring up the leaks.
Yes.
You get rid of all the stuff that's leaking in that's making you ill, and then you bring in all the stuff that adds life and health. And so that's common sense, but it's not, we're so programmed for not that we just got to keep going over the same simple things over and over again. So
Great.
this was an amazing time with you, Stephanie.
Thank
you
you.
are a blessing to me, to my viewers, and to this world.
Thank you, and I very much appreciate what you're doing also, because you're really offering the solution, and that's great to help
I'll
these
keep
people
doing
heal.
it.
It's just wonderful. Thank you for what you do.
Okay. Amen, Stephanie.
Thank
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for watching this and sharing it. It's important information. There is hope. You can do this. Natural nature is the way. It always was and it always will be. It's never going to change. Can you dig it?
Thank you.
Aloha, brothers and sisters. Peace.
Okay, good.